Did you know that Afghanistan's national sport features men on horseback trying to drop an animal carcass into the circle of justice? The game is known as buzkashi, which has been translated to something like goat pulling. Sometimes the ball is actually a calf carcass. Sponsors run the gamut from local warlords to telecommunications companies. And while I'll admit that I have no interest in seeing one of the intense, sometimes grisly matches firsthand, anyone turning their noses up at the ancient pastime might want to look into the composition of an American baseball. Hi, I'm Erin McCarthy, and on this jumbo-sized edition of The List Show, I'm sharing one fact about every country in the United Nations. Well, at least the countries from A to G. We'll have to do some more installments to cover everything, but today we're hitting mandatory chess, seriously cheap beer, and a whole lot more. Let's get started. There were once well over 100,000 bunkers in Albania, one for about every 15 people who lived in the country. They were built on the commands of Enver Hoxha, the country's paranoid mid-20th century dictator. While many have been destroyed or fallen into disrepair, others have been turned into hostels, homes, and even museums. Algeria's national animal is the fennec fox, the world's smallest fox. These little guys often weigh less than 3 pounds and lend their name to the country's national football team, who are known as Les Phénix. Tiny Andorra in the Pyrenees Mountains is the world's only co-principality. Though the country is a parliamentary democracy with a prime minister, the role as the official chief of state is jointly held by two princes. One is the president of France. As of the filming of this video, that's Emmanuel Macron. The other is Spain's Bishop of Urgell. Though Angola's official language is Portuguese, 6 members of the Bantu language family are considered national languages, including Umbundu, which is spoken natively by about a quarter of the country's population. Portuguese in Angola is influenced by languages that predate colonization. The unique blend has been dubbed Portugalano. In Antigua and Barbuda, the fashion police take on a different meaning. It's illegal for civilians, including tourists, to wear camouflage clothing, lest they be mistaken for military personnel. And unlike some odd laws around the world that are on the books but not enforced, this one is legit. You can read accounts online of people's camo clothing being taken from them at customs, and during the 2017 Carnival celebration, a police official announced on state radio that any unsanctioned camouflage would be seized. Argentinians, as a general rule, like their beef. The country has over 14 million heads of cattle, almost enough for every 3 residents to share a cow. The country's beef consumption per capita actually maxed out back in 1956 at more than 100 kilograms of meat per person. That's a little more than 4 pounds of beef per person every week. In 2011, Armenia made chess a mandatory subject for 6 to 8-year-old students. We're not talking about a daily class exactly, but the compulsory weekly lessons are an indication of the country's passion for the game. Armenia has one of the highest rates of grandmaster chess players per capita in the world. If I had been alive in the middle of the last century, I might have made a trip to Sydney, Australia. Not to visit its world-famous opera house, which didn't formally open until 1973, but to patronize what may be the world's unofficial first cat cafe. Located in one of the pylons of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the Lookout was originally conceived as a tourist-centric business, selling souvenirs and displaying an all-Australian exhibition meant to educate and entertain visitors. But after the Lookout's proprietor, Yvonne Rentoul, installed a cattery in the far-flung spot, a group of adorable felines became minor celebrities, covered by ABC News Australia and photographed by the Daily Telegraph. The cats included George, Bridget, and Pylon. A guidebook from the era noted their immaculate garb and priestly aloofness. Austria is home to what may be the world's oldest extant restaurant and inn, Salzburg's St. Peter Stift's Culinarium. They claim it was name-checked in a poem from the year 803 CE, written by one of Charlemagne's advisors. When it first opened, St. Peter's didn't sell food so much as give it out freely to religious travelers, leading to some controversy over the world's oldest restaurant crown, but with over a millennium of hospitality under its roof, I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. Azerbaijan is called the Land of Fire, and that's not just a metaphorical nod to the passion of its citizens. With large quantities of oil and natural gas just below the surface, actual flames were known to leap out from the country's ground for millennia. Yanar Dog, or something like burning mountainside in English, is a modern-day example of what were once much more numerous so-called eternal flames. The Bahamas has an unfortunate habit of attracting unscrupulous outsiders. The Lucayans, who historically inhabited the islands, were largely wiped out within less than 30 years of European contact. Blackbeard and Calico Jack are two of the many pirates who plied their illegal trades in the islands during the early 18th century. And in 2017, the island of Great Eczema was home to the notorious Fire Festival, produced by now convicted fraudster Billy McFarland. Bahrain is often considered to be the center of the lost ancient civilization of Dilmun. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Dilmun is described as some kind of paradise. In reality, it was an important hub for commerce that traded with Mesopotamia and the Indus culture. Archaeological evidence, including huge collections of burial mounds, point to the island of Bahrain's important place in the once thriving civilization. Bangladesh is the 8th most populous country on Earth, but has the rather rough record of being the most populous country to never win an Olympic medal. But the country is very good at sports that are more popular in the nation, especially cricket. Barbados derives its name from the Portuguese Os Barbados, or the bearded ones, or the Spanish version of the same. That's probably not a reference to the grooming habits of the island's indigenous inhabitants. Though it's hard to know for sure, the most widely accepted explanation for the name refers to fig trees found on the island, which have a woolly, sort of beard-like look. Belarus's capital, Minsk, is often referred to as one of the world's cleanest cities. Even when citizens take to the streets in protest, they're known to do so in a neat, orderly way. At a demonstration against integration with Russia, participants tore up photos of Vladimir Putin, but then collected the pieces to put in garbage cans. When citizens calling for long-serving President Alexander Lukashenko to step down, some could be seen taking their shoes off before standing on public benches. As embattled Lukashenko once said, "Cleanliness is our brand." Belgium is a pretty small country, but one day it could be effectively chopped in half. In the southern Wallonia region, people generally speak French. In the north, sometimes known as Flanders, they speak a version of Dutch known as Flemish. The capital city, Brussels, is geographically in the Flemish region but is considered independent and bilingual, at least officially. The country's union seems poised to hold, at least in the near term, but the stark division between the regions has led to periodic calls for partition. Belize is not exactly known for its skyscrapers. Its tallest buildings top out at less than 100 feet, while its tallest structure, the so-called Sky Palace at Caracol, is part of a ruin from the Maya civilization. In Benin, voodoo doesn't involve sticking pins in little effigies of your enemies. More often called Vodun, it's actually considered an official religion in the country and influences the culture and lives of many citizens, including those who practice other religions. It's estimated that about 40 to 65% of Beninese people participate or believe in some elements of voodoo. Chances are you haven't been to Bhutan. The country has a pretty insular history. They only started officially permitting tourists in 1974, and most visitors today have to pay a tourist fee of $200 per night. Cable television was only legalized in the Himalayan nation in 1999, presumably because the king wanted to check out The Sopranos. Alacitas is a Bolivian festival with roots in the area's Aymara people. Today, the celebration often combines indigenous tradition, Christian devotion, and modern-day commerce. Many Bolivians, especially those in La Paz, where the largest Alacitas takes place, stock up on miniature versions of the things they hope to acquire in the coming year. Everything from mini automobiles to houses or even little university diplomas are fair game. These figurines are blessed by Catholic priests and then offered up to the Andean god Iquico in hopes that the full-size versions of the items will enter participants' lives. The modern Olympics began in Athens in 1896. The next time the Games made their way to the Balkans was 1984, when Bosnia and Herzegovina, then part of Yugoslavia, became the first socialist state to host the Winter Games. Making it rain takes on a different meaning in Botswana. The country's currency is called the pula. In the Setswana language, pula means rain or blessings. That may be related to the fact that Botswana is one of the world's more drought-prone countries, making water a particularly valuable resource. Brazilians, as a general rule, love live music. You could glean that insight from walking around Salvador de Bahia or Rio, but the country's passion for performance can also be seen in their recorded music listening habits. Out of the country's top 200 most listened to songs on Spotify in 2019, almost 7% were taped live performances, as opposed to studio recordings. That's tops in the countries analyzed, and more than 4 times the number of live tracks as a percentage than the second-place country, Mexico. In Brunei Darussalam, you might say that December 16, 1941 is a day that will live in infamy. A little more than a week after the Pearl Harbor attacks, Japanese forces invaded Brunei. One factor that likely led to the invasion was Brunei's oil fields. Japan ended up occupying the small country throughout most of World War II. If you want to see an interesting piece of Bulgarian history and buy a can of soda, make sure to look down while you're in Sofia. The Bulgarian capital is dotted with kleks, semi-underground shops that are sort of the Bulgarian counterpart to a New York bodega. Many of the kleks are built in what were once underground bomb shelters. Today, kleks have taken on yet another identity, as a new generation has repurposed some into everything from art galleries to speakeasies. Burkina Faso was home to Thomas Sankara, the man who has been called Africa's Che Guevara. Sankara actually gave the country its name after coming to power in a 1983 coup. Most recently, it had been known as Upper Volta. Sankara was murdered in 1987. But it wasn't until April 2022 that a military tribunal found 11 men guilty of crimes related to his death. Burundi drinks a couple of forms of beer that you're not likely to find outside of Africa. Impike is a sorghum-based, low-alcohol drink that has held a special place in the area's culture for years. Traditionally, each imbiber sticks a straw into a communal vessel in order to partake. Burundians also consume a drink popular in a number of East African countries, often called banana beer in English. Cabo Verde, or Cape Verde, was evidently uninhabited by human beings until the 15th century. Still, it's hard to say who discovered the islands. Some credit the navigator Antonio de Noli, others credit different explorers working on behalf of the Portuguese. But even then, it's unlikely they're truly unknown, with some historians arguing that African coastal traders, Arab explorers, or even the ancient world might have known about the archipelago before the Portuguese showed up. Cambodia's Angkor Wat literally translates to something like Temple City. That name checks out. It's very possibly the world's largest religious complex. One of the most beloved dishes in Cameroon is ndole, a stew usually containing peanuts, bitter leaf, spices, and some kind of protein. Sometimes that protein is shrimp or prawns, which, incidentally, inspired the country's name when Portuguese explorers noticed plentiful crustaceans in the Wari River. Canada has been called the world's most educated country. Over half of adults between 25 and 64 in the country have received education beyond secondary school. All that schooling is paying off. Canadians had the good sense to make their country the largest consumer of donuts per capita in the world. The Central African Republic is one of the poorest countries in the world, but that didn't stop self-proclaimed Emperor Jean Bedel Bokassa from spending an estimated $20 million on his coronation ceremony in 1977. Bokassa seemed to fashion himself as something of a modern-day Napoleon, even down to a crown copying the one-time French emperor. Bokassa was deposed in 1979. Chad's namesake is Lake Chad, which itself ultimately comes from a word meaning large lake. So Lake Chad is Lake Large Lake. And in case you're wondering, the English first name Chad is completely unrelated. We don't know where it comes from, but it might be related to the Brythonic Celtic word for battle. Smithsonian Magazine called Chile an astronomer's paradise. Its dry climate means fewer nights are ruined by rain. Light pollution also poses less of a problem in the narrow country than in more densely populated countries. And seeing how close it gets to Antarctica, parts of the country provide a unique vantage point to observe the southern hemisphere's night sky. The people of China have made countless contributions to the world, from innovating paper products to developing the world's first compass. But the technological breakthrough I want to share is the live crab vending machine, versions of which have appeared intermittently in the country since 2010. Medellin, Colombia is home to an interesting form of public transportation, a nearly 400-meter outdoor escalator. Located in Comuna 13, a part of the city once plagued with violence, the escalator has alleviated the commute of the area's residents and been a part of the area's turnaround. Today, tourists flock to the neighborhood for its street art and to ride its one-of-a-kind mobility option. Comoros is a pretty small island nation off the eastern coast of Africa. If you've ever smelled a perfume that included ylang-ylang, though, there's a good chance that's where it came from. Comoros is the world's biggest producer of the essential oil. It makes up about 10% of the country's export revenue. A Time magazine cover called Noabali Noki National Park in the Republic of Congo the world's last Eden. It contains no roads and has never been logged. Costa Ricans are often referred to as ticos, a nickname that comes from a linguistic habit common in the country. While much of the Spanish-speaking world uses ito as a diminutive suffix, un poquito, flacito, gordito, people in Costa Rica often use tico, which carries a connotation for a small size or just general affection. Côte d'Ivoire produces more cacao beans than any other country. Almost 20% of the population earns their income from the industry. A Croatian conman could theoretically have weaseled a few weasels out of his mark. Sort of. The country's currency used to be the kuna, the Croatian word for a marten, a member of the same family as weasels and otters. The name dates back to the old practice of using the pelts of the adorable little animals as currency. But now Croatia uses the euro, so hopefully visits to a zoo ATM have gotten less confusing. People have been arguing for decades about the effect of Fidel Castro and his Communist Party coming to power in Cuba back in 1959. One slightly lesser-known change that Castro made was to effectively ban Santa Claus on the grounds that he was foreign to their culture. It was of a piece with other anti-Christmas moves that would be rolled out in the next decade that saw the day no longer recognized as a national holiday in the country. The years from 1969 to 1998 are known as La Navidades Silenciadas, or the Silent Christmases. Cyprus is a divided island. The northern part of the country calls itself the Turkish Republic of North Cyprus and is recognized exclusively by Turkey, while the southern part is more aligned with Greece and is the more internationally recognized government. In between is the so-called Green Line, a buffer zone controlled by the United Nations. According to the United Nations peacekeeping force in Cyprus, about 1,000 incidents occur in the zone every year, although incidents covers a lot of ground, everything from the unauthorized use of firearms to name-calling. In Czechia, beer is often cheaper than water. Bottled water, that is. Czechs take advantage of the affordable suds, drinking 3/4 of a pint of beer a day on average. The Democratic Republic of the Congo may one day boast of a city with more French speakers than anywhere in the world. And that includes France. Kinshasa is already estimated to be the largest francophone city in the world, but only about half to 2/3 of its population speaks French daily. With the country expected to grow significantly in the coming years, some estimates say it will double in population in the next 3 decades, it may one day eclipse metropolitan Paris for the highest concentration of French speakers. Denmark is embracing the automobile more than ever. More than 62% of Danish households reported owning a car in 2021. But in many ways, the bike is still king in the country. Or perhaps queen, given that the country's reigning monarch is Margaret II. About 70% of residents over 6 years old own a bike. Danes ride almost a mile per day on average. Djibouti Lac Assal is saltier than the Dead Sea, about 10 times saltier than ocean water. It's also the lowest point below sea level in all of Africa. Dominica's capital, Roseau, has been through a number of names and iterations over the years. It was originally settled by Amerindians. By the time Christopher Columbus sailed past the island and named it Dominica, it was inhabited by a group known as the Caribs, now referred to as the Kalinago. They referred to the area as Sari. It was called Charlottetown at one point and eventually got its name from the French, inspired by the reeds found there by settlers. It was burned by the French in 1805 and again suffered nearly total destruction by a hurricane in 1979, as Britannica.com says. Each time, it's been rebuilt. The Dominican Republic was also explored, conspicuous finger quotes, by Columbus, but he didn't name it after the day he spotted it, as he did with Dominica, which is Latin for Sunday. He actually called his sighting La Isla Española, which gives the name its island today, Hispaniola. The Dominican Republic takes its name from St. Dominic, the namesake of a settlement created by the less famous Columbus brother, Bartholomew. Ecuador's Mount Chimborazo is the furthest point on Earth from the center of the Earth. That might be a bit surprising since it's almost over 8,000 feet shorter than Everest. It gets a bump from its location near the equator, though. The Earth's oblate spheroid shape bulges in the middle, meaning Chimborazo is significantly farther from the Earth's core than its much taller counterpart in Asia. Egypt was once home to the ancient world's most famous collection of knowledge, the Library of Alexandria, but much of what you've heard about its infamous burning is more speculative than you might realize. Numerous sources mention Julius Caesar's troops burning books there, but if that did happen, it was probably an accident following the burning of the ships in the harbor rather than anything deliberate. And even then, it's not clear that the entire collection was destroyed. Centuries later, sources are still talking about the Library of Alexandria. In fact, 2 great libraries of Alexandria, which adds to the confusion. And it's possible no invading army's torch is to blame and the library just really decayed away. According to library expert Richard Ovenden, rather than highlighting the cataclysmic nature of barbaric ignorance triumphing over civilized truth, Alexandria is a cautionary tale of the danger of creeping decline through the underfunding, low prioritization, and general disregard for the institutions that preserve and share knowledge. Thankfully, we've learned our lesson. Moving on. In 2021, El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, made his country the first in the world to accept Bitcoin as legal tender. It's been a rocky rollout. Though the unique arrangement may have given a boost to international tourism, so far the country's investment in Bitcoin has cost it tens of millions of dollars due to the crypto crash of 2022. You might make a big deal out of your birthday, but Equatorial Guinea's president, Teodoro Obiang, probably has you outdone. His birthday is a national holiday in the country. You can't say Obiang is particularly well known for his restraint. He once bought a Boeing 737 with gold-plated toilet fittings, and he's held onto his office since 1979, making him the longest-serving president in the world. During their war for independence from Ethiopia, Eritrean women served alongside men in all capacities except the top ranks of leadership. Tens of thousands fought in the conflict, which lasted for decades. Estonia might not be the first country you think of in Europe, but by some accounts, it's the center of the whole continent. Geographically speaking, that is. It depends exactly what landmasses you count as part of Europe, and it's quite a contentious claim. But a village in Estonia on the island of Saaremaa makes their own case as the center of the continent. Less controversially, Saaremaa is the site of a number of meteorite impacts of uncertain age, but recent, like a couple thousand years ago. The largest and most well-known left behind the so-called Kali crater. The best candidate for longest-serving monarch with a verifiable reign is Eswantini's Sobhuza II. He came to the throne when he was 4 months old and reigned for 82 years. The one slight complication is that for much of his reign, Eswantini was a British protectorate rather than an independent nation. But still, according to historian Bruce Lincoln, when he was introduced to the resident commissioner, he was called, using the old name of Swaziland, the paramount chief of Swaziland and king of the Swazi nation. Ethiopia is often considered Africa's oldest independent country. The only time it was colonized by a foreign country was shortly before World War II, when Benito Mussolini's Italy briefly established a new Italian empire in the region. Fiji's national beverage is yakona, perhaps more widely known as kava. It plays an important ceremonial and social role in the country. Intriguingly, a number of studies have shown kava effective in treating the symptoms of anxiety. Maybe don't go running out to drink kava just yet, though. There are other studies which suggest it can be toxic to the liver. Field Marshal Karl Mannerheim has a mighty reputation as a military hero in Finland. And while you probably won't ever be voted the greatest person in your country's history, as Mannerheim was, you might be able to relate to him on another level. Mannerheim was apparently keenly aware of the importance of appearances and demanded the ability to inspect any photos of himself before publication to make sure they met his approval. Paris is undoubtedly France's most famous city, but it's not actually the oldest. That distinction belongs to Marseille, which was founded by Greeks from modern-day Turkey around 600 BCE. They called it Massalia. Gabon's first known residents were the Baka people, who were once referred to as pygmies. That name was never accurate. Though the Baka are indeed on the shorter side with an average height around 5 feet, they're not nearly as small as that outdated label suggests. It's related to a Greek word referring to the distance between the elbow and the knuckles, which Etymonline puts at around 13.5 inches. The Gambia is one of only a handful of countries that commonly uses a definite article in its English language name. That's partially to remove confusion between the country and Zambia, much farther south in Africa. I'll tell you more about that country in about 100 nations' time. Georgia, the country, and Georgia, the state, share a name in English, but that's about where the similarities end. The southern state is named after King George II. When the country assumed its name, he was still centuries away from being born. Some say the name derives from the Christian country's affinity for Saint George, while others say it dates back to an old Persian label for the area that translates to something like Land of the Wolves. It's not clear which is correct, though, spoiler alert, it's not Saint George, but I will definitely be referring to Georgia as Wolfland from now on. Germany reunified more than 3 decades ago, but the former West and East Germany aren't exactly the same, even today. A report from 2015 found that East Germans spent 79% less on consumer goods than their Western brethren. There's a small but fascinating industry in Ghana making fantasy coffins. Craftsmen create permanent resting places that can take the shape of anything from a sneaker to an animal or airplane. Some of the fantasy coffins have even been exhibited in art galleries. According to a less-than-scientific survey conducted by the condom manufacturer Durex, a higher percentage of people in Greece have sex at least once a week than any other country. Apparently, it's not just the birthplace of democracy. No, wait, that's not how condoms work. Grenada is home to the Caribbean's largest diveable shipwreck, the Bianca Sea. Or is that La Marseillaise? Or the Maréchal Pétain? This sunken vessel has had quite a life. It was originally built in France, but was briefly seized by the Nazis during their occupation of the country in World War II. According to most, but not all, versions of the story, when the Germans retreated, they sunk the ship. Then known as the Maréchal Pétain, it was eventually salvaged and rechristened La Marseillaise. It operated as a cruise ship under that name for several years, with a brief stint as the Arosa Sky, and then finally the Bianca Sea. On a voyage in 1961, an explosion led to the ship sinking. Most of the people on board were ferried to safety, but 3 deaths were eventually attributed to injuries sustained in the disaster. The Bianca Sea burned for days. It's been said that the heat from the fire actually caused the nearby water to boil. Today, visitors to the small island nation can actually scuba dive down to the wreckage. Some even take a swim in the ship's pool. Guatemala has had its fair share of famous visitors. Aldous Huxley said of the country's beautiful lake Atilan, "It really is too much of a good thing." Simone de Beauvoir mentioned buying artisanal fabrics there. But my favorite story of a literary icon's time in the country starts with a plane crash. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry was headed for Argentina via Guatemala back in 1938. His plane crashed during takeoff and was destroyed. The author had to stay in the country to recuperate, and some believe his time there inspired details in his iconic novella, The Little Prince. The protagonist's home, for example, is an asteroid with 2 active volcanoes and 1 inactive one, perhaps mimicking the city of Antigua's inactive Volcán de Agua and active Volcán de Fuego and Acatenango. Others suggest that the book's drawing of a snake that swallowed an elephant looks like Serra de Oro, a geological feature found in the country. It's hard to know for sure, but I like to think a little bit of the Prince's asteroid lives on Earth. Historians disagree on where the word Guinea comes from. The most entertaining etymology is related to West Africa's Susu language, in which a word like Guinea meant woman. One folk history says that when Europeans landed in Africa, they were greeted by women who identified themselves as Guinea. The Europeans supposedly misapplied the word to the area, and a few centuries later we have 4 countries that include Guinea in their name. Guinea-Bissau is the 3rd one of those countries we've gotten to in this video. Its population is unique in that the plurality of residents are Muslim, and yet the official language is Portuguese. It's the only country in the world where those 2 things are true. It's probably worth noting, the official language status is a remnant of the country's colonial past. Today, the most common language of the country is a unique form of Portuguese Creole. Guyana is a South American country whose official language is English. Naturally, a quarter of its population identifies as Hindu. A bit of history will clear things up. The country was once a British colony. In the years following 1833's Slavery Abolition Act, a lot of Indians were brought over as indentured servants to work on then-British Guyana's sugar plantations. Today, ethnically Indian Guyanese people have their own unique culture, influenced by, but distinct from, their South Asian ancestors. Thanks for watching this supersized episode of The List Show. Make sure to subscribe so you can catch parts 2 and 3, and who knows, maybe even 4 of this journey to cover one fact about every country in the United Nations. I'll see you next time.